By the 7 moons of Kethera. I should have known better than to trust the Galactic Council's bright idea of sending humans to fix our little rebellion problem. My name is Vex'tal Morpheus, and I'm what you might call a middle management bureaucrat for the Zilanian Administrative Corps. Was, anyway. Hard to be middle management when there's no government left to manage. Let me paint you a picture of just how spectacularly wrong this whole thing went. 3 months ago, our mining colony on Vel'thar Prime was having what the council politely called civil unrest. What we actually had was a full-blown revolution brewing in the tunnels beneath our capital city. The miners had finally gotten tired of breathing toxic fumes for 12 credits a day while the aristocrats sipped imported wine in their sky towers. Standard procedure, my supervisor, Claxton Myers, had said with that insufferable confidence that only comes from never having worked a day in the mines. We'll request a peacekeeping force from the humans. They're supposed to be good at this sort of thing. Oh, they were good at it all right. Just not in the way anyone expected. The 5 humans arrived on a Tuesday morning, which should have been my first warning. Nothing good ever happens on a Tuesday. Their transport ship was, well, let's just say it had seen better decades. The hull was patched with at least 6 different types of metal, and I'm pretty sure one of the stabilizers was held on with what humans called duct tape. But hey, they'd made it across 3-star systems without exploding, so I suppose that counted for something. The team leader was a woman named Captain Miranda Foster, and she had this unsettling habit of smiling at exactly the wrong moments. You know the type. The kind of smile that makes you check your pockets to make sure your wallet's still there. She was tall for a human, with short brown hair and eyes that seemed to catalog every weakness in your defensive posture before you'd even finished shaking hands. So, she said, looking around our pristine administrative building with its marble floors and gold-plated ceiling fixtures, this is where the magic happens, huh? The way she said magic made it sound like a 4-letter word. Well, yes, I stammered, suddenly feeling self-conscious about the opulence surrounding us. This is the primary governmental complex. We've prepared quarters for your team in the diplomatic wing. How thoughtful, she replied, and there was that smile again. I'm sure it's lovely. But first, maybe you could show us where the actual problem is. You know, the mines where people are dying? Her second in command, a stocky man named Sergeant Jake Thompson, snorted with what I can only describe as barely contained amusement. Cap N, you're being too subtle. What she means is, why don't you show us the hellhole where you're working people to death so we can figure out why they want to kill you? I felt my face tendrils twitch in embarrassment. I wouldn't put it quite so harshly. No, said the third human, a wiry woman with suspicious eyes named Dr. Sarah Vance. You probably wouldn't. That's part of the problem. The 4th member of their team was a young man named Private Marcus Webb, who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else in the galaxy. He kept glancing around nervously and muttering things under his breath that I'm pretty sure weren't compliments about our architecture. The 5th and final human was perhaps the most unsettling of all. Colonel Elena Vasquez was older than the others, with silver streaks in her black hair and the kind of calm demeanor that suggested she'd seen every possible way a situation could go wrong and had contingency plans for all of them. She said very little during the introductions, just stood there taking notes on a battered tablet and occasionally raising an eyebrow at something one of her teammates said. Right then, Captain Foster said, clapping her hands together with false enthusiasm, let's go see what we're working with, shall we? The tour of the mines was educational, for them anyway. For me, it was 3 hours of watching 5 humans gradually lose whatever small amount of faith they might have had in our planetary government. And trust me, they hadn't started with much. The conditions in the deep shafts were, admittedly, less than ideal. The air recycling system hadn't been updated in 40 years. The safety equipment was more of a suggestion than a requirement. And the housing provided for the miners consisted of what could generously be called dormitories and more accurately described as concrete boxes with beds. Interesting, Dr. Vance said, running her scanner over a wall that was quite clearly leaking some sort of toxic gas. This reading suggests prolonged exposure to these fumes causes irreversible lung damage. Well, yes, I said, trying to sound reasonable, but that's why we provide medical coverage. Medical coverage, she repeated slowly. You mean the clinic with one doctor for every 5,000 miners? The one that's only open 3 days a week? Budget constraints, I explained weakly. That's when Private Webb spoke up for the first time since we'd entered the mines. Budget constraints, he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Right. I noticed those budget constraints didn't extend to the solid gold elevator in your building. That's different, I protested. That's for diplomatic purposes. Diplomatic purposes, Sergeant Thompson echoed, and I really didn't like the way he was looking at me. You know what else might serve diplomatic purposes? Not slowly poisoning the people who keep your economy running. Captain Foster had wandered over to a group of miners who were on their break, if you could call huddling in a corner trying to breathe clean air from an emergency tank a break. She started talking to them in perfect Zelanian, which surprised me. Most humans couldn't even pronounce our consonants correctly. How long have you been working these shafts? She asked an older miner named Vex'tal Williams. 23 years, he replied, his voice hoarse from decades of breathing toxic air. My father worked them before me. His father before him, and the conditions have always been like this? Vex'tal looked around nervously, clearly wondering if he was going to get in trouble for speaking honestly. Getting worse, actually. Used to be they'd shut down sections when the gas got too bad. Now they just hand out more masks. Masks that don't work, added another miner. A young woman named Kira Davis, half of them are defective. Colonel Vasquez, who had been silently observing the conversation, finally spoke up. How many people have died in the last year? The question hung in the air like the toxic fumes we'd been breathing. Vex'tal and Kira exchanged glances. Official count? Kira asked. Real count, the colonel replied. 47. Vex'tal said quietly. That's just in our sector. I felt my stomach drop. The official reports I'd been filing showed 12 deaths planet-wide, all attributed to industrial accidents. Captain Foster turned to me with that smile again. But this time it was different, colder. Industrial accidents, she said, is that what we're calling suffocation now? The reports, the Safety Commission. The Safety Commission, she interrupted. That meets twice a year and consists entirely of people who've never been below ground level. I was starting to understand why the miners wanted to revolt. More troubling, I was starting to understand why the humans looked like they wanted to help them. We spent the rest of the day touring the various levels of the mine, and with each level deeper we went, the humans became more quiet and more dangerous looking. By the time we reached the deepest active shaft, where the newest workers were assigned, Private Webb had gone completely pale and Dr. Vance was muttering what sounded like very creative curses under her breath. This is a death trap, she said finally. You're literally sending people into a death trap. Now, that's hardly fair, I protested. Safety protocols are in place. Safety protocols, Sergeant Thompson said, pointing at a sign that read danger, toxic gas, proceed with caution in 3 languages. You mean like that sign? The one that's posted next to a shaft where people work 8 hours a day? The sign warns them to be careful, I said defensively. It warns them to be careful, he repeated. Right. Hey Marcus, next time you jump out of a drop ship, I'll just put up a sign that says caution, gravity, proceed with care. That should keep you safe. Private Webb actually laughed at that, which was the first time I'd seen him smile all day. Thanks, Sarge. That's real helpful. Captain Foster was talking to more miners now, and I noticed they were answering her questions with an openness that they'd never shown to any government official. They were telling her about the organizing meetings, the plans for work stoppages, the demands they'd been trying to present to the administration for years. So what you're telling me, she said to a group of about 20 miners who had gathered around us, is that you've been trying to negotiate for basic safety improvements for 5 years, and the response has been to increase your quotas and reduce your wages? That's about the size of it, said Vex'tal. They tell us the economy is tough, profits are down, everyone has to make sacrifices. Everyone except the people in the Sky Towers, added Kira. The Sky Towers, Dr. Vance said, and I really didn't like the way she said it. Those would be the residential complexes for the administrative class? That's correct, I said carefully. The ones with the climate control, and the imported air filtration systems, and the personal medical staff. Well, yes, but that's necessary for government operations. Government operations, she repeated. Right. Like the dinner party you're having tomorrow night? The one that costs more than these miners make in a year. I stared at her. How do you know about that? Lucky guess, she said. But she was looking at Colonel Vasquez when she said it. The colonel smiled for the first time since I'd met her. I do like to stay informed. That's when I realized we might have a problem. These weren't just peacekeepers. These were something else entirely. The next day, things started to go sideways, and by sideways I mean completely off the rails in directions I hadn't known existed. It started with Captain Foster's morning briefing. I'd expected her to present a plan for containing the rebellion, maybe some suggestions for increased security measures. Instead, she walked into the administrative conference room with a stack of papers and that terrifying smile. "Good morning, everyone," she said cheerfully. "I hope you all slept well in your comfortable beds with your clean air and your functioning life support systems." The sarcasm was so thick you could have mined it. "Now," she continued, "I've had a chance to review your situation, and I have some recommendations." Claxton Myers leaned forward eagerly. "Excellent. What kind of security measures do you suggest?" "Oh, I'm not suggesting security measures," she said, still smiling. "I'm suggesting you fix the problems that are causing the rebellion." The room went very quiet. Around the table, the various department heads and regional administrators stared at her like she'd just suggested they set themselves on fire. "I'm sorry," said Administrator Vex'tal Brown, who managed the mining operations. "Did you say fix the problems?" "I did indeed. Here's a list." She began distributing papers around the table. Point 1. Immediate improvement of air quality in all mining operations. Point 2. Reduction of work shifts from 12 hours to 8 hours. Point 3. Provision of actual medical care, not just emergency treatment. Point 4. Wage increases to reflect the actual danger of the work being performed. "This is ridiculous," sputtered Myers. "We can't possibly afford these changes." "Oh, but you can," said Dr. Vance, who had apparently been doing some calculations. "I've run the numbers. That, if you reduce administrative salaries by 30% and cut back on luxury expenditures, you can fund all of these improvements and still maintain a healthy profit margin." Reduce administrative salaries. Vex'tal looked like she was having some sort of seizure. That's not how government works. It's how government should work," said Sergeant Thompson. "You know, serving the people instead of living off them like parasites." "Now see here," Myers said, standing up with his face tendrils flushed bright purple. "We are not parasites. We are the legitimate government of this planet." "Legitimate," repeated Colonel Vasquez, speaking for the first time. "Interesting word choice." "What do you mean by that?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. "I mean," she said, pulling out her tablet, "that according to the Galactic legal codes, a government's legitimacy is based on the consent of the governed. And according to my informal survey yesterday, about 92% of your population would like to see you all launched into the nearest star." That's not how you measure legitimacy," Myers protested weakly. "Actually," said Captain Foster, "that's exactly how you measure legitimacy. The people you govern have to agree to be governed. If they don't, you're not a government. You're just a group of people with fancy titles living off other people's work." The room erupted into chaos. Everyone was shouting at once, demanding to know who these humans thought they were, insisting that they had authority, that they had rights, that they had tradition on their side. Private Webb, who had been quietly sitting in the corner, chose that moment to speak up. "You know what you have," he said, his voice carrying clearly over the shouting. "You have a revolution. And guess what? We're not here to stop it." The room went dead silent. "What did you just say?" Myers whispered. "I said we're not here to stop it," Webb repeated. "We're here to help it succeed." And that's when I realized that we weren't dealing with peacekeepers at all. We were dealing with something much more dangerous. We were dealing with humans who had decided that our government needed to go. The next 72 hours were, without question, the most surreal experience of my administrative career. And considering I once had to explain to the Galactic Council why our entire judicial system had been replaced by a gambling tournament, that's saying something. It started when Captain Foster stood up from the conference table, brushed imaginary dust off her uniform, and announced, "Meeting adjourned. You have 48 hours to begin implementing the changes we discussed, or we'll implement them for you." "You can't do that," Myers shrieked, his voice cracking like a teenage Zelanian going through molt. "You have no authority here." "Authority," said Dr. Vance, packing up her equipment with the casual efficiency of someone who'd done this before, "is a funny thing. It only works when people believe in it." "The miners believe in us now," added Sergeant Thompson helpfully. "Funny how that works." And they were right. Somehow, in the space of 24 hours, these 5 humans had managed to do what our government hadn't accomplished in decades. They'd gained the trust of the working population. I found this out the hard way when I tried to leave the building for lunch and discovered that a crowd of about 300 miners had gathered outside. Not an angry mob, mind you. Just waiting, watching, like they were expecting something to happen. "Vex'tal," called out Gextor, waving me over. "Come here, friend." Friend. When had a miner ever called me friend? I approached cautiously, half expecting to be torn limb from limb. "The humans," he said, his eyes bright with something I'd never seen before. "Hope, maybe. They're really going to help us, aren't they?" Well, that is," I stammered, suddenly aware that my answer mattered more than any report I'd ever filed. "They are," said Kira, joining the conversation. "Captain Foster promised us. Said they'd seen this kind of thing before." "What kind of thing?" I asked, though I was beginning to suspect I already knew. "Corrupt governments," she said simply. "Said they specialize in fixing them. Fixing them. Not reforming them. Not negotiating with them. Fixing them." I excused myself and hurried back inside, my mind racing. I found the human team in what used to be the executive conference room, but they'd somehow transformed it into what looked like a military command center. Apps covered the walls, communication equipment hummed quietly in the corner, and Colonel Vasquez was coordinating with someone off-planet via encrypted channels. "Ah, Vex'tal," Captain Foster said without looking up from a tablet displaying what appeared to be organizational charts. "Perfect timing. We need to discuss your role in the transition." "My role in the what?" "The transition," she repeated patiently, "from your current system to something that actually works." "But I'm just middle management," I protested. "I don't have any real authority." "No," said Private Webb, who was monitoring communication feeds from around the city, "but you have something better. You have institutional knowledge and, more importantly, you seem to have something resembling a conscience." "A conscience? When had anyone ever accused me of having one of those?" "Look," said Dr. Vance, turning away from a medical chart she'd been studying, "here's the situation. Your government is going to fall. That's not a threat, it's just a fact. The question is whether it falls peacefully or violently. And that," added Sergeant Thompson, "depends on how cooperative your fellow administrators decide to be." I stared at them. "You're staging a coup." "We're facilitating a transition," Captain Foster corrected. "The people are staging a coup. We're just providing technical assistance." "Technical assistance," I repeated numbly. "Think of us as consultants," said Colonel Vasquez, finally looking up from her communications. "Very specialized consultants." The next morning, I woke up to discover that the planet's primary communication network was broadcasting something that definitely wasn't the usual government propaganda. Instead of the daily announcements about production quotas and civic responsibility, citizens were hearing detailed reports about working conditions in the mines, government expenditures, and what the colonel cheerfully called administrative transparency initiatives. "How did you get access to the broadcast system?" I asked Captain Foster when I found her in the communications center, apparently having the time of her life. "We asked nicely," she said, not looking up from the control panel. "You asked nicely?" "Well," said Sergeant Thompson, who was monitoring the feeds. "We asked nicely after Marcus here demonstrated some of his computer skills." Private Webb looked up from a bank of servers with a slightly embarrassed expression. "I may have accidentally discovered that your entire security system was password protected with the word password in Zelanian. But still, our IT department assured us the system was impenetrable," I said weakly. "Your IT department," Webb replied, "consists of 3 people who learned programming from a manual that's older than I am. No offense." "That, some taken," I muttered. The broadcasts were having exactly the effect the humans had probably intended. All across the planet, people were learning things about their government that they'd never known before. Like the fact that the administrative class consumed more resources in a month than the average miner family saw in a year. Or that the safety equipment budget had been cut 6 times in the past decade to fund decorative improvements to government buildings. "This is going to cause riots," I warned them. "No," said Dr. Vance, who was reviewing reports from medical teams she'd somehow organized overnight. "This is going to cause change." "There's a difference." She was right, of course. Instead of riots, what we got was organization. Workers in every sector began forming committees, electing representatives, and presenting unified demands. The miners were just the beginning. Soon, the agricultural workers, the transport operators, the service technicians, even the lower-level government employees were all coordinating their efforts. "How are they organizing so quickly?" I asked Colonel Vasquez, who seemed to be the information hub for the entire operation. "They're not organizing quickly," she replied. "They've been organizing for years. They just needed someone to show them how to make it effective." "Someone like you?" "Someone like humans," she corrected. "We've had practice with this sort of thing." That afternoon, Myers called an emergency session of the Planetary Council. All the major administrators gathered in the main hall, voices raised in panic and indignation. "This is intolerable," Vex'tal was shouting. "They're undermining the entire structure of government. They're broadcasting classified information," added Finance Minister Tex Rod Johnson, "economic data that could destabilize the entire system." "The system is already destabilized," Captain Foster pointed out from where she sat in the gallery, apparently invited to observe the proceedings. "We're just making it obvious. You have no right to interfere in our internal affairs," Myers declared, pointing an accusatory tentacle at her. "Internal affairs," she repeated thoughtfully. "Is that what you call slowly murdering your own citizens? We are not murdering anyone." "No?" Dr. Vance stood up, holding a tablet. "Because according to the medical records I've been reviewing, the average life expectancy for a miner on this planet is 34 years. The average life expectancy for an administrator is 78 years. That's quite a gap." That's just the nature of the work," Myers stammered. "The nature of the work," she said, "could be changed with proper safety equipment, reasonable working hours, and adequate medical care. All of which you've consistently refused to provide. We can't afford it." "You can't afford not to," said Sergeant Thompson, "because here's the thing about revolutions. They happen whether you can afford them or not." "Are you threatening us?" demanded Administrator Vex'tal. "Threatening you?" Thompson laughed. "Lady, I don't need to threaten you. You've threatened yourselves. You've built a system that only works as long as people are willing to die for your comfort, and guess what? They're not willing anymore." That's when Myers made his fatal mistake. He stood up, drew himself to his full height, and declared, "I am calling for military intervention. This human interference ends now." The room went dead silent. Captain Foster looked around at the assembled administrators with something that might have been pity. "Military intervention," she said quietly. "Colonel, would you like to field this one?" Colonel Vasquez stood up with the smooth grace of a predator. "I'd be happy to." "Administrator Myers, exactly which military were you planning to call?" "The Planetary Defense Force, of course." "The Planetary Defense Force," she repeated, consulting her tablet. "That consists of Colonel Raxton Pierce and his 12 officers." "That's correct. The same Colonel Pierce who submitted his resignation this morning, along with his entire command structure." Myers' face went through several interesting color changes. That's not possible. Oh, it's possible, said Private Webb, who had been monitoring communications. In fact, it's already happened. Turns out, military personnel don't like being asked to shoot civilians, especially when those civilians are their own families. But the orbital defense platforms, Myers was grasping at straws now. The automated systems, said Captain Foster, that require authorization codes to activate? Yes. The authorization codes that were changed this morning as part of a routine security update. Myers stared at her. Changed to what? Changed to something you don't know, she said cheerfully. Amazing how these computer systems work, isn't it? And that's when I realized that these 5 humans had just pulled off the most elegant coup in galactic history. They hadn't fired a shot, hadn't issued a single threat, hadn't even raised their voices. They'd simply made the old system irrelevant. So, said Dr. Vance, addressing the room full of former administrators, the question now is what happens next. What do you mean? I asked. She said, that you have a choice. You can try to maintain a system that no longer functions, or you can help build something better. Help build what? A government that actually serves the people who live under it, said Captain Foster. Radical concept. I know. Over the next week, I watched the most efficient transition of power in recorded history. The humans didn't replace our government with something of their own design. Instead, they helped the people of Vel'thar Prime build something completely new. Worker councils were established in every sector. Representatives were elected not based on wealth or family connections, but on their ability to actually solve problems. The old administrative buildings were converted into public hospitals, schools, and community centers. The sky towers became affordable housing. And the humans? They packed up their equipment, filed their reports, and prepared to leave. That's it, I asked Captain Foster as she supervised the loading of their transport ship. You're just leaving? Our job is done, she said. You don't need us anymore. But what if something goes wrong? What if the new system doesn't work? She smiled. And for the first time since I'd met her, it was a genuinely warm expression. Then you'll figure it out. That's what humans do. That's what any intelligent species does when they're given the chance. And if we can't, you will, said Colonel Vasquez, joining the conversation. You know why? Because you've already started. You're asking the right questions, worrying about the right things. That's more than your old government ever did. As their ship lifted off into the afternoon sky, I realized something that should have been obvious from the beginning. The humans hadn't come to Vel'thar Prime to stop a revolution. They'd come to teach us how to have one properly. 6 months later, I'm still working for the government, but now I'm working for a government that actually governs instead of just existing. My job title is Public Resource Coordinator, and my primary responsibility is making sure that resources go where they're needed instead of where they're wanted by people with expensive tastes. It's harder work than my old job. It's also infinitely more satisfying. The mining operations are still running, but now they're safe. The workers have decent hours, proper equipment, and medical care that actually works. Productivity has gone up, costs have gone down, and nobody has died in an industrial accident since the transition. The former administrators? Most of them adapted surprisingly well once they realized they could contribute to society instead of just consuming it. Myers found out he's actually quite good at logistics when he's not trying to hoard resources. Vex'tal discovered a talent for safety engineering that she'd never had the chance to develop. And every few months, we get reports from other planets in the sector, places where worker unrest is growing, where governments are failing, where people are starting to ask uncomfortable questions about why they're suffering for someone else's benefit. The reports always end the same way. Request immediate assistance. Send humans, because apparently, word has gotten out about what 5 humans can do when they decide your government needs to go. And honestly, I can't think of a better advertisement for the human approach to problem solving. Just don't tell them I said that. They're cocky enough already.